Hi, I'm Alexa, and today we are going to talk about something that I wanted to learn more about. I am going to throw it out there right now. I am not an expert on this. I have been reading up on this for the past couple of days because of current events, and I am going to do my best to share what I have found with the caveat that if I do misspeak, it is completely unintentional, and I am here to learn more about it because I think that it is fascinating. So, if you have not seen my series on the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States, it was, I think, a 5-part series on the Constitution. It was the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and then the Bill of Rights. The rest of the amendments were in 2 videos, and then I went back and talked about Articles 4 through 7 of the Constitution itself. In my first video, we talked about Article 1? Is it Article 1 or Section 1? I think it's Article 1. Article 1. Article 1 of the Constitution sets up our legislative branch. Now, within there are certain things that are written, and similarly throughout the entire Constitution, including the amendments, like our rights when they are enumerated, being some of them are designated as for citizens versus for everyone. Within Article 1, there are things that are designated within it as the legislative branch has the power to do this, and there are some that don't explicitly say that. So today we are going to talk about habeas corpus. Habeas corpus is quite literally translated as "you have the body." It is a legal procedure where a person can petition a court to determine the legality of their imprisonment or detention. So if you have been detained and you are being held by, I believe this only applies, has been said it only applies to the federal courts, but I also think a lot of states have similar concepts within their state constitutions. So if let's say you're detained by immigration as you're coming through an airport, you have a right to challenge the legality of them stopping and detaining you. So I was confused, and why I wanted to look this up and kind of learn about it and talk it through was in the first few conversations, news articles, things that I was seeing about it, I wasn't fully grasping what the difference was from due process. I believe, and I do hope people correct me if this is incorrect, but I believe that habeas corpus, upon reading about it, it's really only one piece of due process. So due process is everything from illegal search, right? They have to have the process to search. They have to have probable cause. They have to have search warrants, all of that at the beginning of a thing. Then, obviously, if they're detaining you legally, if they're getting you in front of the judge, you have a right to a speedy trial. Let's say you are convicted. If you wish to appeal, there are certain rules around how and when you may appeal. There's rules around all of it, and the due process of not just the court, so the police, the courts, and then detention. So if you are remanded to custody, if you're found guilty of something, there's due process covers all of those things that we are afforded, that we have a right to within all of those steps within the process. Habeas corpus is a piece right at I want to say it's right at the beginning, but I think that's the wrong way of saying it. Habeas corpus is literally challenging, can they hold me? That's the way I'm understanding it. It makes a lot of sense why it is coming up in relation to the current events that it is coming up in relation to, and why due process is also being talked about in relation to those current events. This is not going to be talking about the current events. I don't think I know enough just yet on these current events and this concept to make a valid argument either way for what is going on. So today we're going to focus on just learning what this actually is. You know me, I will have a link. It will be in the description. So from Constitution Annotated, which does analysis and interpretation of the U.S. Constitution, I will put a link to the article, the web page article about this Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2. So this specifically says the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. So we have that right to habeas corpus to challenge whether they are legally detaining us or whether they need to let us go. This is saying that that right can be suspended in two instances, rebellion or invasion, when public safety requires it. That's all it says. It does not say where the line is on what's public safety. Is it if a single person has the possibility, the remote possibility of being hurt? Is that public safety? Does it need to affect more? How many more? What is that? What is public safety? Is it quite literally losing your life, or is it any type of harm, mental, emotional, financial, and physical, right? What does it mean? What is public safety? How grave a danger does it have to be? So there's a lot of gray area in that. And then let's not even talk about rebellion and invasion, because you could interpret those very differently from other people. And there are some very creative interpretations of those two words and what they mean currently occurring in our current administration, which again, I'm not going to be getting into in depth, but in context of why I wanted to learn more about this specific writ of habeas corpus. It is being driven by current events. So hopefully that is a little bit of a tie-in so that as you're seeing things in the news, you can also kind of start putting some of this stuff together, which is what I'm trying to do. And I'm sure a lot of people are trying to do that right along with me. So reading this site on Constitution Annotated, it really does mention that there was a lot more talk about this right, this writ of habeas corpus, and yet the only thing that made it into the Constitution was this single line. This is within Article 1, which is establishing the legislative branch and the powers afforded to it therein, but it does not specifically say Congress has the power to suspend the privilege of writ of habeas corpus. Like, it doesn't call that out. So that's important, because one of the things that is going on right now is that certain people are arguing because it doesn't say it, any of the branches can suspend it. Specifically one, but any of them. I would be of the opposite opinion, that if it is specifically outlined in the section that is outlining the Congress, the legislative branch, and their powers, it's under them, right? It is specifically in the section that lays out the legislative branch. It is not in the executive. It is not in the judicial. It is in the legislative. Historically, the link that I found, it will show you cases where the few cases where this writ has been suspended. One of them was actually by Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, and there was enough outcry that he did end up going and seeking and obtaining the congressional authorization. So historically, there are multiple ways we can interpret the Constitution. What did the person who wrote it at the time they wrote it actually mean? I think that that's a very limiting way of looking at it, because there's literally no way to know every single thing that something you're writing is going to cover. There's no way. There has to be a little bit of flexibility in our laws. Otherwise, we would need to create a brand new constitution every few years, especially in our current day and age where things like technology are advancing at such a phenomenally fast rate. Our laws are not keeping up with them. So there has to be flexibility in those laws to account for advancement, to account for modernization. That's my personal opinion. Obviously, there's a whole slew of opinions out there. The fun part about studying the Constitution and law, whether it's in the US, whether it's overseas, is there are other people out there who would like to debate those as well, to talk about this and to learn about it and to grow and to get the understanding. There are people who dedicate their whole lives to studying the Constitution, and I would love to find someone that I could even bring on this channel and talk to about some of this stuff, because I think it's fascinating, and to get another point of view and have that conversation in real time with people, it would be fun to do. So if you know anyone, let me know in a comment, because that would be fun. I would be very open to doing that. One of the things on here, and the thing that most stuck out to me, and probably I won't say the last thing I'll talk about, but the one thing I'm intentionally talking about is that the last case, well, I don't think it was necessarily the last case, but the last case on the page that they talk about was, and I hope I say this right, Boumediene v. Bush. Essentially, the court held that Congress's attempt to eliminate all federal habeas jurisdiction over enemy combatant detainees held at Guantanamo Bay violated the suspension clause. Guantanamo Bay is an absolute legal nightmare. There are people who have been held there for, I think, over a decade at this point without due process. Because it is not within the US, it is technically argued by some that our laws do not apply. However, it is a US facility operated by the US outside of the country's laws there, right? So our law and our rule is being implemented in the facility. The facility is run, but then to argue that it's not covered by our laws, but we're the ones maintaining the law within it, I think that's a real slippery slope, and there are so many violations of just human rights that go along with it. So in this was saying that the government basically had not established that suspending the detainees' rights to challenge that being detained at the time, I don't know if this was at the time of the actual court case when the Supreme Court ruled, but it was 6 years. 6 years? You are going to detain someone for 6 years and give them no due process. You're not going to allow them to challenge. They had no lawyers, no representation, no nothing, no due process at all. 6 years, and you're going to claim that that's public safety? I think we have to very much challenge whether that is true. Now, there are some very bad people out there in the world. I'm not naive enough to think that there aren't. But I also think that if we do not maintain the law as we have agreed upon, as our country operates, if we do not uphold that, we cannot expect others to uphold that law either, to follow that rule of law, to respect that rule of law. I do see parallels between Guantanamo Bay and what is happening right now. I think that it is going to be pushed to an even bigger extreme based on writings and things that have been published in the past couple of years by the people shadow advising the current administration, trying to consolidate power into the executive branch that was not given to the executive branch. As I said earlier, I believe that it was intentionally put in the article that establishes the reach of the legislative branch for a reason. I am looking forward to maybe learning a little bit more about this and developing more thoughts and possibly evolving over time. I do not have a personal opinion on the public safety, like what constitutes public safety. I do not have a personal opinion on what constitutes rebellion or insurrection, I think it was. Invasion, sorry. I don't have a personal opinion formed yet on what in this clause those mean, what constitutes a rebellion or an invasion, and that public safety requires it. A threat to public safety would be within that. If you made it this far, thank you. Let me know your thoughts, and I will see you on the next one. Take care of yourself.